بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we have a very dear guest with us. Yousef is a Palestinian author who lives in Istanbul right now, and we wanted to have him on the show to discuss with us some of the challenges that the Palestinian people go through on a daily basis. And even before the October 7th events. But before we hand it off to him, let me just properly introduce him. Yousef Aljamal is a researcher in Middle Eastern studies and the author and translator of a number of books. He is a co-author of Shared Struggle Stories of Palestinian and Irish Hunger Strikers. And he was actually recently here in San Diego with us, and he gave a very powerful talk at the ICSD Masjid. And that is where we actually met. It was an honor to meet him. And I wanted to invite him to our podcast, to our show, so he could share his story, and it remains on YouTube. And I'm sure he has shared this story many times before, but the more exposure the Palestinian struggle gets, I think the better. So without any further ado, I would like to hand it off to Yousef to tell us about the day-to-day struggles that the people of Palestine in general and the people of Gaza in particular go through. So we have a bit more context as to what is happening right now. So Yousef, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Sohail, for the invitation. What happened recently with the October 7 escalation is that the people of Gaza have moved from slow death that they've been living under for the past 16 years of very tightened Israeli siege from land, air, and sea to an immediate death and destruction. And even before that, life was never normal in Gaza. Since 1948, when 200,000 Palestinian refugees ended up in Gaza, tripling the number of Palestinians living there from 100,000 to 300,000 over 3 months,
Mm.
from June to October. Gaza has become one of the most populated places on earth. Today, we have 2.3 million Palestinians living in Gaza,
Mm.
a very tiny, piece of land that is, besieged from all directions, with no access to clean water, education, healthcare, and today, I would say, without access to internet, cellular services, where the Israeli defense minister officially ordered shutting down all basic services in Gaza.
Mm.
And this is a strike reminder that Gaza is under occupation. Uh, Israel left Gaza from the inside, but they still control Gaza from the outside. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to shut down all these services: water, internet, fuel, um, uh, so easy. So 70% of people in Gaza are refugees, including my family. There are 8 refugee camps in Gaza. And life has always been very tough for people there. Poverty, crowded refugee communities, lack of access to clean water. 97% of Gaza's water is unfit for human consumption, and this was before the escalation. Today, there is no electricity to run generators, so people could have access to desalinated water. In the past, Israel bombed the only sewage desalination facility. which means that millions of cubic meters of sewage had to be pumped into the Mediterranean,
mm,
which also damaged the aquifer in Gaza. And in addition to the excessive use of the aquifer, pumping of water because of digging water wells in Gaza, the water situation is very catastrophic. And now with this escalation and without having electricity and the inability of a lot of these purified water providers to move and drive around Gaza because they are at the risk of being bombed by Israel. The situation is very disastrous. A friend of mine posted on Twitter that they got to the stage where they have to prioritize children first when it comes to clean water. So they give water to children, and then if they have enough water left, then they will drink.
mm,
Uh, this is a continuation of poisoning Palestinian water wells in 1948 by Zionist militias to push Palestinians out.
mm,
Uh, Israel, under U.S. pressure, said, and I'm not sure, I cannot verify that they will resume water supplies to southern Gaza. But a lot of people in southern Gaza are still complaining, saying that we do not have access to water. But again, if Israel does that, then it means they are doing that in line with their plan to push people out to the south and then to Egypt, to the Sinai.
mm,
And Palestinian refugees do not want to become refugees again. We are sick of a humiliation, living under occupation for 75 years, being separated politically, geographically. My grandparents were separated for 20 years because they lived in Gaza and the West Bank when Israel was established, and they were not able to meet physically.
mm,
This, generational trauma and Nakba catastrophe impacted all generations, impacted my parents, and is impacting our generation now, and will continue to impact the future generation if this madness doesn't come to an end. Um, People have to understand that even before this escalation, our life was never easy. Hundreds of patients lost their lives in Gaza because of the lack of access to adequate healthcare, including my sister. In 2007, she needed a permit to have a minor surgery, which was not available in Gaza due to the siege, and she planned to travel to Jerusalem to have it, which is an hour away. And then she needed an Israeli permit, and this shows the level and magnitude of Israeli control over our lives, even when it comes to healthcare and education, electricity and water, which proves once again that Israel is has the final say in Gaza, is the occupying power. And then Israel denied my sister a permit to have a minor surgery in Jerusalem, and she had to wait a few more days at the hospital to be able to leave through Egypt, through the Rafah crossing that connects Gaza with Egypt, which was also shut down. And once she had the surgery, she lost her life. So this is our life before the escalation. And now with the escalation and magnitude of destruction, it's unbelievable what is happening to the Palestinian people in Gaza is ethnic cleansing, and it's happening with a green light from the West. It's happening, unfortunately, now live on camera, on TV, and the world is watching our death in silence. We refuse to be silenced in Gaza. We refuse to become refugees again. It's enough. The world has to wake up and treat Palestinians in Gaza as equal. Um, Yesterday, Israel bombed the Arab Baptist hospital in Gaza, which was established in 1904, killing 500 people. And not just that, denying responsibility that they did not do that. Once they did it, I told one of my friends that they're going to deny it because we're now familiar with Israel's tactics and policies. At the beginning, they took responsibility. Some Israeli spokespersons, such as the spokesperson for the military in Arabic, Afiqai Adrai, some people close to Netanyahu, such as his advisor, um, I forgot his name now, but uh, Naftali, I think Nahania was his name. Once they realized the magnitude of
mm,
death, they deleted their tweets.
mm,
Um, so what we live in Gaza today is a genocide, but it's a continuation of a slow genocide that has been going on for 75 years, where Israel controls our lives, the lives of Palestinian patients. Hundreds lose their lives,
mm,
and even cancer patients. We do not have, a healthcare system, and this was before the escalation. And now there are more hospitals and medics targeted, and doctors. Dozens of doctors and medics were killed intentionally by Israel, along with their families. In some cases, ambulances were attacked, hospitals were attacked, and even before the escalation, a lot of these drugs, basic drugs, I think one third of drugs were missing from the shelves in Gaza.
mm.
Um, it's what was happening is unbelievable, in many different ways, and the world has to understand that we just shifted from slow death, where, for example, cancer patients are denied permits to have chemotherapy sessions in Jerusalem because this is not possible in Gaza, to immediate death, where entire families are erased from the civic records. There are 80 Palestinian families who were completely removed, deleted. All of them were killed in Israeli airstrikes. And there are 1,000 people now, stuck under the rubble. So we have, I know, we lost count. Maybe like, if this doesn't stop, God knows, the numbers we will get to.
Yeah, subhanallah. Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned was the denial of the Zionist regime that they bombed the hospital, and this is a very common theme, their deception, and I think to a certain extent Americans have come to realize about the deceptive nature of the Zionist regime, but for some reason they accept this deception upon themselves, which is very sad. We know for a fact that the Iraqi war, when the decision was being made about whether to push the weapons of mass destruction narrative, Mossad was involved in that, and then the New York Times came back and apologized to the American people about the misinformation, and there have been so many different occasions in the past, such as what happened with the American naval ship Liberty, where they actually killed and slaughtered American servicemen, um, and just got away with it. So it's very sad that the United States is allowing all of this, and it's accepting deception upon itself. It's very sad.
Misinformation for us means that we will lose more people.
Mm,
There's almost 1,000 Palestinian children
mhm,
who were killed so far, more than like 350 Palestinian women. And if we recall, this came after a misinformation campaign where there was this pro-Israel journalist who claimed that she saw
mhm,
images, or she saw like bodies of beheaded babies, which was later proven to be a lie.
mhm,
And based on that, even in the US, Palestinian child named Wadi' Fayoumi in Illinois,
mhm,
6-year-old, he was stabbed to death by um, his landlord, who walked into the house, and
mhm,
he chanted like Islamophobic chants before killing him.
mhm.
So we're paying the price in different parts of the world for this misinformation campaign
Yeah.
that depicts us as evils,
Mm,
human animals, as
mhm,
Israeli defense minister described Palestinians, or beasts.
mhm,
which again shows the level of magnitude of dehumanization the Palestinian people have been subjected to.
Yeah.
No one talks that we've been living under occupation for 75 years.
Mm.
We do not have a choice, over living under occupation. It's not something
Yeah.
that we chose. It's something that was imposed on us.
Yeah.
And all these restrictions on our freedom to move, to have access to healthcare and education, to be united as a nation, um, is because of this occupation that we never chose.
Yeah.
That we also completely reject and do not want, but then we do not have a choice, and then we're blamed. Victims are being blamed for their misery,
Mm.
which is a very unique situation. Not only this, they're being, victims are being portrayed as evils. Netanyahu using words such as like children of light against the children of evil, civilized word.
Mm.
Like, Gaza is 3,000, if you speak of civilization, 3,500 years old. It's one of the oldest cities in the world.
Yeah.
The ruins, archaeological discoveries everywhere in Gaza. And it's unique that Israel, which was established just 75 years ago, is talking about civilization.
Mm.
It's ironic and sad at the same
Yeah.
time. Anyway, so yeah, we're paying the price for this misinformation campaign, and but
Yeah.
again, people are using social media because the mainstream media is not being fair.
Mm.
Israeli politicians such as Naftali Bennett, they go on mainstream media and they get angry because they're reminded that there are Palestinian civilians being killed in Gaza, and he was like, "Excuse me, like, how dare you talk
Mm.
about Palestinian
Yeah.
civilians?"
Yeah. So I
They're
think.
even bragging about, they're saying that the war is not with Palestinian factions only, it's also with Palestinian civilians. And they're very clear about it. They say on mainstream media, they're not challenged.
Mm.
But then if it's like a Palestinian speaker, the first thing they ask is to condemn.
Yeah.
And like, it's not our job to
Mm.
condemn anything.
Yeah. One of the narratives that they keep on pushing is that they're just in war against one specific small group, and they're okay with all other Palestinians. All other Palestinians are friends, and which what
The
do you have to say about
Palestinian
that?
struggle for freedom did not start in 1987 when Hamas was established.
Mm.
It started in 1948. So for 40 years, we did not have this particular group.
Mm.
But then the PLO was also described as terrorist by Israel.
Mhm.
So what I see here is that there is a war against Palestinians, regardless of where they come from, who they are.
Mhm.
Just their mere existence is a threat to the state of Israel. A war against Palestinian refugees. Israel wants to push Palestinian refugees further to the south, as it
Mhm.
did in 1948,
Mhm.
by all possible means. This happened in 1948, where at least 15,000 Palestinians were killed. And at the
Mhm.
time, this was like 1% of the population.
Mhm.
If we talk in today's terms, it's a big number.
Mhm.
But at the time, there was no media coverage, and they got away with it.
Yeah.
Although they brag about it in some documentaries.
Mhm.
But other than that, you know, it's a war of independence. Israel is portrayed as a victim that became victorious over seven Arab armies.
Mhm.
But the truth is, Israel was built on the ruins of Palestinian towns and villages. It's a result of ethnic cleansing, of making people in Gaza refugees and people in the West Bank and Jordan refugees, in Lebanon and Syria. So we have to go back to history to understand what's happening today.
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Something you mentioned about Palestinians getting pushed further down to the south. I think one of the things that they were actually suggesting was for Egypt to open its borders so all Palestinians can go to Sinai, and supposedly they're gonna do their operation and then have them back. Which obviously,
We know for sure that Palestinians will never be allowed back because this
yeah,
is the same promise that was given to them in 1948 that they
Mm-hmm.
will be back in 2 days. The good news is that Egypt is against this plan,
Yeah.
and they said clearly that we will not take Palestinian refugees into the Sinai. This is not our responsibility, it's Israel's responsibility. And
Mm-hmm.
today, the Egyptian president said that there is another desert up north
Mm-hmm.
called the Naqab Desert where
Yeah.
Israel can take Palestinian refugees there if they
Yeah.
want.
But they won't.
Uh,
That's a
and
problem.
again,
Yeah.
Palestinians do not want to leave. They
Yeah.
don't want to become refugees again. So
Yeah.
this plan is going to fail.
Mm-hmm.
But the sad news is that there will be thousands of Palestinians who will be massacred on
Mm.
the way.
Yeah.
Because the way Israel is bombing Gaza tells us that it's very genocidal.
Mm.
It doesn't,
They haven't,
you
and
know,
there is a larger goal. There's a goal behind it. It's not
yeah,
just
they're
because of
pushing
what
people
happened on
away,
October
they're
7th.
killing people, destroying their lives.
Mm.
Entire neighborhoods were leveled to the ground, so people cannot go back again and live in these houses.
Mm.
Basically, Israel is destroying the future possibility of these people coming back again.
Yeah. So what do you have to say? I think a lot of people just miss the big picture and what the Zionist regime is actually trying to do here. Because I think you even mentioned in your speech here in San Diego that they are very open about not wanting Palestinians at all in those lands, on those lands. I think I'm not sure who mentioned it. Please correct me if I'm saying this wrong. So basically, one of their politicians had said the Palestinians had three options: either a life of subjugation, migration, or death. I think that's. I'm not sure if it was you who mentioned it.
Yes.
So I think people just don't realize that this is not about Hamas. This is not about a particular uh, city in
I mean,
Palestine.
it's never, as I said, Israel bombed an UNRWA school, a hospital
Yeah.
yesterday. What does this have to do with Hamas? An UNRWA school where people sought shelter in
Yeah.
Maghazi refugee camp, killing 6 people. Israel bombed a bakery in my refugee camp yesterday, killing 2 people.
Hmm.
Uh, so the goal is very clear to push Palestinians out. They always said that the good Palestinian is the dead Palestinian.
Hmm.
And they've been very clear about it. They don't want Palestinians. They see refugees as a threat to their project.
Hmm.
Um, who they know very well that these refugees will go back one day.
Yeah.
So they want to get rid of them, send them to another country. This transfer mentality um, is very present in Israel's
Hmm.
um, planning and policies. Israel's defense minister Yoav Gallant,
Hmm.
he's one of the engineers of the siege of Gaza, and he has 3 options for Palestinians: either to be killed,
Hmm.
or like to run away,
Hmm.
uh, or to be arrested. So this is how they treat Palestinians and how they view Palestinians and their future. And
Hmm.
we're not surprised. We know this very well. We've been living with this for 75 years. It just gets worse every year and every day for the Palestinian people. I mean, it's not only about Gaza. Look at what's happening in the West Bank,
Yeah.
and Israeli, lynching and arson attacks against Palestinian villages, destroying mosques and
Mm.
churches, and uprooting olive trees, attacking Palestinian communities, executing Palestinians
Yeah.
on camera. It's unbelievable what's happening in the West Bank and Jerusalem too. And
Yeah.
what's happening in Gaza today cannot be separated from what's happening elsewhere.
Mm.
And the fear even Palestinians in Israel go through because of these threats made by these settlers.
Mm.
Uh, I think the world has to realize this. Their support for Israel is a support for an occupying power against an occupied people. The way they frame it is not going to change the
The
facts on
reality.
the
Yeah.
ground, the reality that we've
Mm.
been living under occupation for 75 years. Our land and resources are shrinking, um, and using lethal force is not the way to deal with the Palestinian people in
Yeah.
Gaza, in particular.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it hasn't worked so far, and it hasn't worked for any government, to be honest. Like, for example, what happened with the U.S. and Afghanistan, a very significantly small group of people relative to the people that were fighting them. I think the whole world was fighting them. Then they still weren't able to defeat them, right? And then they retreated at the end. So it's just I don't see how this is gonna be any different. And in this case, it's actually 1.8 billion people, Muslims, on the side of the Palestinians. How are they gonna win this battle? I think for a lot of times, I think what a lot of the discussions that we have and a lot of the activisms that people like you do to a certain degree is actually for the other side as well, because they are leading themselves to destruction, and we know what happens at the end, to people who side with the oppressors. So I want us to go back to something that you mentioned when you were here, regarding the Israelis blackmailing cancer patients to become, to work with them to be able to get treatment. And also, if you could talk about your story about your studies, because I want people to know exactly what was happening before October 7th as well. It seems like people are just too caught up with an event that is, in the grand scheme of things, is very irrelevant to the oppression that's taking place.
Yeah, so as I said, in Gaza, there is no access to cancer treatment because hospitals in Gaza are not allowed to be equipped
Mm,
with, you know, medicine and devices that treat cancer. So people have, and this is part of Israel's control policy against Palestinians in Gaza.
mm,
Uh, so people have to apply for Israeli permits to go to Jerusalem to have treatment at a hospital called Augusta Victoria. And
mm,
in many cases, Palestinians are rejected. They're not given a permit. They're denied a permit. And in 19% of these permits that get approved by the Israeli military, um, they come late.
mm,
19% of them. So imagine, this is very critical for cancer patients, and there are
mm,
people who never get these permits in the first place. And people who get these permits,
mm.
some of them get the permit to have the first chemotherapy session, but not the second time.
Yeah.
And then they're blackmailed to work for the Israeli government against their people to get a second permit. And this is common. A lot
Mm,
of people choose to die in Gaza over working against their
mm,
people, collaborating with Israel against their own people.
yeah.
So this regime of permits is used to collectively punish the people of Gaza,
Mm,
and to push them to surrender and collaboration. And this was before before the escalation took place. Gaza has been living under siege for 16 years.
mm,
This is what we're trying to say, what we try to convey to people, that this is not sustainable.
mm,
Something will happen. I never imagined that would happen this way. I thought that something like, the Great March of Return, for example, Palestinian refugees cannot be caged in Gaza forever. They took to the streets, to the border in 2018. But what happened? Israel killed 300 Palestinians and injured 20,000 others. Although these protests were peaceful,
mm,
a lot of people were maimed and lost their limbs. They were targeted, like in their knees, intentionally by Israeli snipers. Um, so this is our life before the escalation,
mm,
uh, which was normalized, and the status quo was accepted. That it's okay for like dozens of Palestinians to die every month because of lack of access to healthcare.
mm,
Um, so we're trying to tell people, no, this is not okay. We slow death is is as bad as immediate death, and
mm,
um, there is no like comparison when it comes to destruction. Where this is good destruction, this is like bad destruction. Or
yeah. Exactly.
Destruction is destruction. Also, students were not saved, these policies. So a
Mm,
lot of people have to apply for permits to leave Gaza through Israel.
mm,
And but this is also an option that is not available to the majority of people in Gaza. Only 2% of people leave through Israel. 98% of people are not even given a permit. So the only way for them to leave is Egypt. And then there are like thousands of people who are signed up to travel.
mm,
So to be able to travel on time is a challenge. And sometimes I remember 2013, I had to go to the border 5 times. It took me 5 weeks to be
mm,
able to travel. Um, so this is, again, our life. We do not have an airport. We used to have an airport. We do not have a seaport. Israel doesn't allow us to have a seaport. And they go and say rudely to the world that we do not control Gaza. We lift Gaza. No, they never lift Gaza. They know
mm.
everything about Gaza. They have control over the internet, water, fuel, the civic registry. The
Mm,
Palestinian authorities in Gaza and the West Bank cannot even issue an ID for a Palestinian without an Israeli approval. There is no, Palestinian sovereignty, and
mm,
we've seen this with COVID-19 and how we were at the mercy of Israel. When it comes to testing and kits and medical supplies,
mm,
um, where Israelis were given the priority over Palestinians. But to go back to life in Gaza and the siege, students are impacted. Schools, the Islamic University of Gaza, where I got my BA in, I saw a video. I was shocked. It was completely destroyed.
wow.
All these
SubhanAllah.
buildings, and they bombed them. They destroyed because they know like education is very important for Palestinians, and
Mm,
98.5% of people in Gaza are literate. So they want to destroy the educational system
yeah,
so that Palestinians become, an ignorant nation,
mm,
uh, which makes it easy for Israel to subjugate. But this is not going to happen. Education is not just a building; it's a style of life.
yeah,
If you destroy a building, then I mean, the Islamic University when it started, they started with tents.
yeah. SubhanAllah. Yeah, I mean, this is just a common theme, which goes back to the greater Zionist agenda. They and it's sad that most people don't see that what they're trying to do is just to exile and remove all Palestinians from their lands. And inshallah, one day, soon, people will start seeing this. I want to ask you about um, the the most effective way of the most fruitful way of resistance from a Palestinian's perspective. What has been the most impactful way of resisting the occupation, both from the Palestinian perspective and both from your observation from um, what we are doing here and outside of Palestine and in the West and in the other parts of the world?
I think in Palestine, our mere existence is resistance,
Mm,
because this is what Israel, wants wants us to be out of Palestine, to have control over our resources and land.
yeah.
So the more Palestinians we have, the fact that we stay on our land and cultivate our land, sometimes cultivating the land is resistance.
Mm,
Making sure that people have independent sources of income is resistance. Employing people. We have a lot of IT professionals in Gaza who have
mm,
the degrees, but the skills, but they cannot find jobs.
yeah.
This is also resistance. Being, educating ourselves about our history and having the tools to defend ourselves intellectually is also resistance.
Mm,
So the Palestinian people have the right to resist. This is, um, stipulated in the UN Charter
yeah.
and conventions that people have the right. We live under occupation, so people choose how to resist.
Yeah.
Um, but from the outside, I think, spreading awareness is very important. Educating people. There are a lot of people who do not know. using all speaking to Congress people about what's happening in Palestine is
Mhm.
important, although um, many of them are, do not care enough, but some do. Um, Educating, communities and speaking to students on campuses, going to different places, going out of our comfort zone, speaking to different interfaith groups
Mhm.
that care about Palestinians, connecting with them, because this is what Israel is trying to say. This is a religious war. It's not. People have always lived in Palestine, coexisting in Palestine, Muslims, Christians, and Jews in peace. It's about Zionism and the confiscation of Palestinian land and denying
Mhm.
the Palestinian people their national identity. So it's important that we connect with other groups and struggles too, and exchange ideas and build solidarities beyond, um, like transnational solidarities
Mhm.
with other oppressed people. I think is very important too. Um, Helping, people on the ground, financially, and also, like politically and
Mhm.
culturally, connecting with them is also important.
Mhm.
um, Being their voice. Now, electricity is shut down in Gaza. People do not have access to internet and electricity, so they even cannot convey what's happening to them to the world. We
Mhm.
should be their voice, speak on their behalf. When Palestinians cannot speak, we should step up and speak on their behalf, tell their stories. Um Tell your friends and neighbors. If you work anywhere, just talk to your neighbors and tell them the story of what's happening to the Palestinian people, because this is the only way we can change this.
Yeah. Yeah, very true, very true, and I believe I definitely see more people, many more people doing it this time around, and it's around the world. So Alhamdulillah, may Allah Azza wa Jal grant us victory in our struggle against the oppressors. One of the things that I still cannot wrap my head around, and I want to ask someone who has lived in Gaza, Gaza, and has seen how heavily guarded it is, and has seen the degree by which Palestinians are controlled. I just can't wrap my head around how this event happened, um, and basically the 6 hours that passed then without any response from the Zionist regime. Just from someone who knows how heavily guarded Gaza is. Do you have any thoughts on this or
Yeah, I agree with you. It was a surprise to many people, including myself. But at the same time, and after reading some commentaries and interviews with even Israeli officials,
Mhm.
the Israeli intelligence was unable to predict what happened.
Mm.
There was a major intelligence failure on Israel's side. The attack took Israel by surprise. Israel was paralyzed for a few hours before it was able to understand what happened,
Mm.
and this has to do with many factors. One of them is the planning of the attack and the way it happened. So there were like a huge number of people, of gunmen, who broke into the borders at the same time from different points, and um, using different tactics that was able to overcome Israeli radars. They destroyed also, once the attack happened, they destroyed all these communication and intelligence towers surrounding Gaza that transmits information to the Israeli military. And the Gaza brigade was completely paralyzed. A lot of people, like in the army, almost 300 people were killed. People who are in charge of keeping Gaza under siege were somehow neutralized, killed, arrested, or um, were not able to communicate with their supervisors. So I think the Israeli military was not ready, and now once the war ends, we will see like a lot of investigation committees in Israel trying to explain what happened and how it happened. But definitely, it was a huge intelligence failure. And again, the Israeli intelligence is one of the strongest in the world, but it's not perfect. It's uh, it's managed by humans, and humans make mistakes too.
mhm.
So I think
So,
they were not ready, and they did not expect that, and they failed.
mm. So one of the things that I think we often get asked in the West as Muslims is, what is the solution? You know, and I was actually asked this the other day, and I many people are quick to give their own opinion, but basically, I believe that the solution at the end of the day, it lies in the hands of Palestinians, and there are many people who are very quick at giving their own opinions. So,
Yeah.
what do you
As I
think?
said, Palestinians live under occupation. They do not have a final say
Yeah.
over what should be the solution.
Mm,
However, Palestinians have proposed a solution to the
mm,
world, calling for equal rights.
mm,
And this is a compromise on the side of the Palestinians, that they accept equal rights for everyone. If they want to live in peace and worship, because Palestine is like the Holy Land, it has been a land that had hosted the three Abrahamic religions,
mm,
then everyone should be able to live in peace and harmony.
mm,
This means that Palestinian refugees should be allowed to go back uh, and visit every time they want, and everyone who wants to live in Palestine should be allowed to do that.
mm,
Those who don't want, then it's their choice. So equal rights is the way out of this. But again, equal rights means dismantling Israel.
mm,
I mean, dismantling the way Israel looks today. Israel will not continue to will cease to exist the way it does now,
mm. Yeah.
if equal rights are given to Palestinians, because Palestinians, with the return of Palestinian refugees, will become the majority. 80% of Palestinian towns and villages are still empty, so the right of return is possible.
Mm.
And then again, Palestinians do not have a problem with anyone who wants to live in peace and harmony with them, based
So,
on equal rights.
yeah, but the question becomes, how feasible is that solution when you know that the other side does not want any Palestinians?
The other side doesn't want any solution. The other side
Yeah.
wants no state solution.
Yeah.
They didn't want two state solution. And then when we talk about the other side, we shouldn't think that Israel is going to accept any solution. Israel
Mm,
doesn't want any solution. I think this solution will be imposed on them rather than them accepting
mm,
this solution. Israel will not become um, will not end its occupation one day, just like they will not wake up and say, "Oh, the occupation is over." It has to be imposed on them in different ways. The international community through boycott, for example, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. When they know that the cost of occupation is too high, then they will have to accept it, not
yeah.
because they want to.
Yeah. Yeah. May Allah Azza wa Jal make it easy. That we get away, out of this situation, and defeat the oppressors. One of the things that I want to keep on going back to, because I believe that is the main thing that's missing from this whole conversation, is basically the West tends to dehumanize the Palestinians. So it's very important to constantly remind the West that that they're acting in a supremacist way, in a very racist way. Um, and they're just taking whatever the Zionist regime tells them, and they run with it. So I want, if you could talk about some of your books, some of the things that you have written, and some of your colleagues, if you could, and tell us about what motivated you to write some of those things, if possible.
So since I was in recently in the US talking about light in Gaza, I would like to talk about light in Gaza and my contribution and the contribution of other authors.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 12 authors who contributed to the anthology, which was edited by the American Friends Service Committee, Jennifer Bang and Mike Merriman Lotz and Jihad Abu Salim. Was published by Haymarket, and the topics in the book vary. It goes beyond the traditional view of Gaza as being under siege, and it tries to envision a future without siege and military occupation.
Mm-hmm.
In my chapter about I talk about travel restrictions and how they impacted my family, and other chapters we have authors talking about intelligence, artificial intelligence, and how it could be used
Mm-hmm.
to imagine the future of Gaza. Other people talk about architecture and how it could be used to rebuild a free Palestine and Gaza. Uh, Other authors talk about agriculture and how it has transformed over the years. The majority of Gaza's district
Mm-hmm.
villages were agricultural communities, and all of a sudden Palestinians ended up in Gaza without any land,
Mm-hmm.
and how the agricultural patterns and practices have changed over the years due to what happened in 1948, the catastrophe Nakba of the Palestinian people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a chapter that talks about culture and poetry and print, and how Gaza was early in time in terms of access to print, and poetry, and the cultural scene in Gaza has always been very active,
Mm-hmm.
even after Nakba and before Nakba.
Yeah.
So there are different topics, first Intifada, second Intifada, suffering of the Palestinian people, freedom of movement, as I said, and access to healthcare, students' struggle, and
Hmm.
life in Gaza, and educational life in Gaza itself.
What's
Um,
what's the best way for a Western audience to get to know more about the people of Gaza, and what
I
they
think
go through day to day?
I highly recommend purchasing a copy of Light in Gaza,
Mm.
Writing Born of Fire by Haymarket. It's online. There are a lot also of resources, like they should read We Are Not Numbers, which
Mm.
is a website coming out of Gaza by Gazan authors. In fact, one of these authors, Yousef the West, was killed by an Israeli airstrike 2 days ago.
Mm.
Uh, but there are also dozens of other writers in Gaza who write about their lives, and not just like what's happening to Palestinians in terms of destructions and war and siege,
Mm.
but about different aspects of food and life in Gaza, and
Mm.
just like important writings that also cover life
Yeah.
beyond siege and occupation.
Mm. Yeah. So that's, I think that's very important for our audience to buy, inshallah, and to read. So I think at this point, um, I don't have any more questions. I think we can talk about this for a very long time. Uh, but I want to hand it off to you if you have any messages, any concluding comments that you want to make for both for the Muslim community and also the West American and the Western community in general.
What's happening in Gaza today is not something that came out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's been building up for many years, and people should understand that living under occupation and siege is unacceptable today. The Palestinian people in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine have the right to be free, um, and sustaining an occupation for 75 years is not the way out. This will not bring security to anyone. And, you know, with like so much destruction and death in Gaza, this will only make it worse. And this will not push Palestinians to change their minds and,
Mm-hmm.
accept subjugation under occupation. The Palestinian people were created free, and the same as any other nation on earth, and they have the right to have their own, sovereignty and human rights respected. So my message to the world is that they should remember Palestinians as a human beings, rather than statistics and numbers, and that we have the right to live in dignity, um, and to be free.
Mm-hmm.
That's very basic and simple. Other than that, it's just like a narrative that tries to mix right with wrong
Mm-hmm.
and blame the Palestinian people for their own misery,
Mm-hmm.
which is not acceptable. The Palestinian people have been struggling for over 100 years now under British colonization and then Israeli occupation. And after 100 years, more than 100 years now, 160 years, um, nothing changed. I mean, Palestinian people did not stop, despite the fact that they suffered much losses.
Mm-hmm.
They lost beloved ones. Some of them spent 42, 43 years in Israeli jails, talking about political
Mm-hmm.
prisoners. This did not change the mind of Palestinians, because Palestinian people feel like they have the right to defend themselves and to live in dignity on their own land. And
Mm-hmm.
this will continue in the future. And the question of Palestine is not about Gaza only. Gaza is 1.3% of historic Palestine. It's much bigger than that. Although Gaza, in many ways, represents Palestine and what's happening in every corner of Palestine, question of Palestinian refugees and the siege and attacks by the Israeli settlers and military. But again, it's not Palestine. Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
70% of people are not from Gaza. They're refugees in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
We have to look at the larger picture.
Yeah, very true. Very true. As you were thinking, as you were talking, I actually was reminded of another story that you mentioned, and I'll take my statement back. I'll ask this question as well, and that is the humiliation that the people of Gaza go through when they have to deal with the Zionist regime and their security checks and the movement. I think some of the things that you mentioned when you were here, one of them was when one of the soldiers mocked your father for being sad for the death of your sister, I believe, and
Yeah.
also and
So
yeah.
when my father and aunt tried to bring the body of my dead sister back to Gaza, they were turned around twice. For 2 days, they would travel like 50 miles from Al Arish Hospital in Egypt in an ambulance to the border, and then they would be turned back by the Israeli military. On the third day, they were allowed to enter Gaza, and this shows, the level and magnitude of control and humiliation. Even if you're dead, they're not done with you.
Mm,
Uh, so as they entered Gaza, my dad was crying and over the loss of his eldest daughter. An Israeli soldier asked him, like, "Why do you cry? All of us will die." I said, like, these soldiers are responsible for restricting the freedom of my sister and her
mm,
access to health care, and thus losing her life. They're responsible, partially responsible for that, and then they mocked my father. Also, in the first Palestinian Intifada, they would stop Palestinians and humiliate them in front of other Palestinians,
mm,
including asking them to remove a Palestinian flag or spit on another Palestinian, or
mm,
just dance for their entertainment. 18 years old. Uh, Israeli soldiers armed to the teeth
mm,
make fun of refugees and entertain themselves by asking or forcing them to dance. And my dad was asked to do that one day, and he had no other option but to agree, because if he said no, they would, beat him and torture him and sometimes arrest and kill him. But he was smart enough. He tracked them. He said, like, you have to clap for me. And once they put their guns aside, started clapping for him, he picked up his slippers and he ran away. And there were all these types of rumors about his fate, that he was killed and
mm,
tortured, and my grandparents had to deal with trauma of losing him and what happened to him. And so he went to nearby orange orchard, and he hid there. He climbed one of the trees and he hid there because he didn't want to go back, otherwise he would be arrested.
mm,
And when it was sunset time, he made the call for prayer. That's how his parents were able to
mm.
recognize his voice and know that he was alive and kicking. So it's generational. This happened in 1980s, and my sister was lost her life in 2007, and today, to 2023, you see what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah.
It's never endless.
Yeah, and I think people need to realize that your father was simply coming back from work when that
Yeah,
happened. So he wasn't like,
actually, he was working in Israel as a
yeah,
cheap labor.
mm, yeah. And if they do this to, to just normal citizens of Gaza, imagine, basically it just shows that everything that they're saying is a lie. That it's not about any particular group. About a racist, supremacist mindset that sees Palestinians as a lesser people. And may Allah Azza wa Jal grant us victory against this mindset. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us victory against the oppressors. And may Allah Azza wa Jal protect all Palestinians, whether in Gaza or any other parts of the world, and all Muslims and all oppressed people around the world, inshallah. So, with that, I want to thank you for joining us, Yusuf. And I would like to, mention if anyone else would like to get in touch with Yusuf, if you're okay, perhaps to do more events like this. Perhaps that may be a good idea. That's something inshallah we can arrange. But again, thank you very much, Yusuf, for joining us. And I believe you shed, yeah, you shed a lot more light on what's happening right now. And we hope this conversation continues and never dies out.
Thank you.
Thank you.